Okay, good morning, everyone, and thank you for your attendance this morning on this extra planning committee. And the first item that we've got on the agenda is apologies for absence.
I've had apologies from Paulette Smith.
Yeah. Item 2, the disclosures of personal and prejudicial interests. Are there any?
Chair, as board member, I don't know whether I need to declare a personal interest.
We check on that if you want, yeah.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Don't think so, but yeah.
John?
Good morning, councillors. Councillor Evans, no, you don't need to declare a personal interest just for being the ward member. It's only if perhaps a close associate or someone you knew living near the development would be affected. You may want to declare an interest in that scenario, but that would be a matter for you to decide then.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I won't be declaring an interest.
Okay. No one else? No? Can't see any other hands up. Okay. Thank you. Item 3 then, any items for deferral or withdrawal?
No, Chair.
Right, and we move on to then item 4. Determination of planning applications under the Town and Country Planning Act of 1990. And the first item is item 1, see on page 5, and it's the land north of Garden Village. And it's over to you, Chris.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Morning, everyone. So we've got 2 applications on the agenda. They both relate to the same outline permission and to the same site. So the site is what we've commonly called at Planning Committee previously the Garden Village site, which is the one to be developed by Persimmon Homes. The site is one of the council's strategic development sites as set out in the council's LDP. So the outline permission is 2016-1478, which was granted permission on the 12th of December 2019. Now, the outline permission granted consent for up to 750 dwellings, including 20% affordable units, a primary school, commercial buildings, outdoor space and play areas, and all of the associated infrastructure and engineering works. The 2016 permission, as I say, which was granted in 2019, was subject to a Section 106 agreement, which required a variety of contributions, and these are set out for members' information on pages 52 and 53 of the report. So the outline permission granted permission for the principle of the development, amongst other details such as access arrangement, and the 2 applications before you today provide details of the buildings, the layout of the scheme, further details of access arrangements and internal access roads and landscaping details. The development now relates to 705 dwellings, 2 commercial buildings, and all of the open spaces, play areas and infrastructure works, etc. You will see from the descriptions of development, the applications also seek to discharge some of the conditions which formed part of the outline permission. So I think the first application seeks to discharge, I think it's 8 conditions which are listed there on the presentation, and the second application seeks to discharge 4 different conditions of the outline permission. So the 2 applications before you today, they relate to nearly all of the application site with the exception of the school. So from the slide there, you can see the school site does not form part of these reserve matter applications. The application for the school will follow at a later stage, and we assume at this point that application will be made by the council's education department.
Yeah, can I interrupt you a minute? It's Councillor Evans. It is. Am I right in saying the school has got outline planning consent for sorry,
Yeah.
the council would have outline planning consent. So
Yeah.
that will still remain for the school, isn't it?
Correct. So the outline permission granted permission for, as I said earlier, up to 750 houses, the school, the commercial buildings. These reserve matter applications basically deal with everything apart from the school. So the school is not included in any way as part of these applications, but they will be subject of a separate application at the appropriate time. I mean, the applications before you have been subject of extensive negotiations between the developers and council officers. And I know Steve, Lucy, Tom Evans and Matt Bowyer have been negotiating on this scheme for approximately 18 months now to get to the point where we are now. And I think it's safe to say that all of them are very pleased with the outcome that we've managed to secure, as I understand our persimmon. The final scheme that's presented to you today is not subject of any objections from any of the statutory consultees. That's all listed in the report, although there have been some objections from local residents. So I think there have been 8 letters of objection to the first application and 3 to the second. But members should note that the majority of the points of objection relate to issues of relating to the principle of the development. So we obviously can't revisit the principle of the development because outline permission's already been granted. So that's all we can look at today is the details of the scheme relating to the design of the buildings, their position in the layout, and so on. And I would draw members' attention to the points of objection raised from residents to say none of the residents have actually taken issue with the design of the buildings or their position, an example, in proximity to existing buildings. So we assume residents are generally satisfied with the layout of the development. So Steve is going to take you through the placemaking and green infrastructure issues relating to the site, and I know he's got a variety of slides to show you. I will mention only very briefly now that Steve will look at the visual issues, but in terms of the impacts on the residential amenities of local residents, we don't think that there are any. All of the buildings are set off the common boundaries of the site, so there's no real overlooking or overbearing issues on neighbours. And I know Matt and his team are happy with the scheme from a highway perspective. The one other thing to mention is affordable housing. So as I indicated earlier, the scheme required 20% affordable housing at outline stage. That 20% is now provided. So there are a total of 141 affordable houses within the development out of the 705 proposed. So thanks for that. Thanks for listening. I'll pass you over to Steve.
Thank you, Chris.
Okay, thanks, Chris, and hello, councillors. Okay, before we go into the visual presentation, I think it's useful just to remind all of ourselves the importance of placemaking. Obviously, this is a term that's increasingly being used because it's really fundamental to the mission of planning in terms of why we do what we do. So at the top of the page there with the blue banner is an extract cropped from the current version, edition 11 of Planning Policy Wales, which is a very useful reminder of what placemaking is all about. It's all about that holistic approach to planning and designs of developments, focusing on positive outcomes, drawing on an area's potential. And the key thing is towards the end of that extract there, creating high quality developments and public spaces that promote people's prosperity, health, happiness, well-being in the widest sense. So we know that's really critical, and we know the importance of getting these housing developments right, especially with some of the spotlights placed on existing areas during the COVID lockdown, about the importance of access to green space, the importance of private gardens, the importance of having areas within the homes for home working and those sorts of things, how things are changing, and that's really focused in on what we're going to be doing in future. So Placemaking is at the top there. The process of placemaking is a key mechanism. You can see my cursor there to deliver the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, which is that very familiar graphic at the bottom of the page there. And one of the key ways of making this placemaking agenda happen is through the 5 ways of working, primarily collaboration, and that's going to come up hopefully strongly in this presentation. This scheme, this new place that's being created, has been the outcome of a really positive and open and creative collaboration process between your council officers and the specialist team put together by Persimmon Homes. And we're all really pleased with the way that we've been able to work together completely through the COVID lockdown, with a huge number of workshops done online with very positive outcomes. The other thing to mention is, I think as of April this year, the council signed up to the Placemaking Charter for Wales, which is all a series of pledges to make sure we, as a whole organisation, deliver those placemaking requirements. And I think we're one of the first council signatories in Wales, so really proud of that. And the other thing, obviously, increasingly you'll hear us talk about green infrastructure, which is often abbreviated to GI, which is the bringing together of landscape, ecology, water management, play, recreation in a very multifunctional way. And this is a key facet of the placemaking approach. And it's certainly a strong point of the site we're presenting to you today. So the placemaking approach, as you know, isn't just something that just crops up on applications. It's well and truly embedded into the council's local development plan. So placemaking is a key theme that went through the local plan inquiry. We've got specific policies that deal with placemaking at all scales, as well as the placemaking of specific requirements for each strategic site. So on the screen here, you've got the concept plan for what's known as strategic site SDB, which we all know is the kind of garden village strategic site. And the concept plan there sets out some of the key requirements, such as a sustainable extension of garden village, a new park at the heart for the new and existing community, a new school at the centre for the whole community, new and existing, active travel routes to Gorsine and High Street, which is in close proximity, extensive areas of retained landscape, integral green infrastructure within the development, outward facing edges of the development so it embeds well into the countryside and the visual impact, and overall a high quality place. So that's in the LDP. We also, as you will know, we've got our supplementary planning guidance for residential developments, which was recently approved to be updated, but that's the current 2014 version on the top left there. And that's been a key document we've used to assess and negotiate these schemes. So going back to the outline application that Chris referenced before, 2016-1478, you can see the number there in the bottom corner, which was approved back in December 2019. This included a set of parameter plans, which were important to fix certain key aspects, as well as providing flexibility to get into the detail and testing of the scheme. So you can see examples of some of the parameter plans. I know they're small on your screen, and it's just to kind of remind you that these were a key part of the outline. Parameter plans that set sort of diagrams for the street hierarchies, for where the key building frontages should be, for the distribution of land uses, the location of the school, for example, which is embedded into the outline, and that has outline consent, the different character areas, the distribution of open space and play around the scheme. And these are really important, these parameter plans, and we use them all through all of the strategic sites. You might recall a similar series of diagrams for the Park Mawr strategic site in Penllygare. And these help us to fix those key things without getting bogged down in the detail of exactly where is a tree located, exactly what does a house look like. So these guide the reserve matters. These are a material consideration for the formulation and assessment of the reserve matters before you today. So this is the overall site plan currently proposed for approval. I know this is a big plan on a small screen, especially I don't know if anyone's viewing this on their phone, but there are extracts of this plan as we go on to the next slides. But just to reiterate, overall, this is 705 houses, a mixture of 2 to 4 bed homes, including some flats. There's commercial units at the centre, if you can see my cursor here, which are located at the key junction coming in off Hospital Road. The future school site here, which has the mechanism for delivery in the section 106. We have full accordance with the outline parameters I showed you on the previous plan, a connected network of streets that are low speed streets with embedded integral green infrastructure. So these are streets first and foremost for people to walk and cycle around, and it also accommodates the cars. Highway colleagues have been extensively involved in the workshops, and we know that refuse trucks and refuse trucks and the like can fully maneuver around the site, as well as them being a really good place to live. And the other thing to say is that, well, there are obviously over circa 300 drawings into this application, and we've distilled it down to 30 slides for you today. But the positive process we've ended up at is via this collaboration, these ways of working. And the way we did this is the applicant entered into a planning performance agreement, often we call that a PPA, in order to fund officer time across all disciplines, not just planning, to refine and negotiate the scheme via a series of online workshops to focus on key parts of the site, the main orchard park, for example, the main entrance boulevard, as it's called, what the houses look like, how some of the green streets in the more quieter parts of the site work. And this has been a really exemplar process in terms of the way this has been resourced by officers, and the way that the applicants team have come to the table, very positive to collaboration and find solutions. And ultimately, this is a mass house builder, a PLC house builder, really embracing the green infrastructure and placemaking agendas. So this is more detail on the different parts of the site. This is the western end of the site, closest to Gysainen. This is the lower density area because it's a kind of more sensitive landscape, and these are the larger Charles Church's houses there that you can see my cursor going around. You've got the active travel link, which is for walking and cycling. You can see my cursor there going off to Gysainen. You've got drainage features, basins, which are designed as features in the landscape. So then they're not functional, they're multifunctional with a perimeter path, informal enjoyment, adds character to the area. You've got retained hedgerows coming through here, which provide ecological connectivity to a sink area that's protected, a site of nature conservation interest, as well as walking routes, as well as house frontages, and the whole things we've been talking about, access to green space and well-being from access to greenery. We have a number of more informal neighborhood parks, like this smaller one here, which is very much for that local community there. There's a much bigger orchard park down the bottom here. You can see my cursor to the south, which I've got plans on later on. And also within the scheme, you can see all these little green circles, and every single one of those is a new tree. So there's extensive tree planting along the main streets with street trees, which are in council ownership. So they will be allowed, I should mention, all the streets are intended to be adopted. So these trees will be allowed to mature and add character, as well as planted verges, which adds green infrastructure to the street scene, obviously, and legibility. So you know you're on a main street that goes somewhere because of the trees. Then as you come into these more informal streets, if you can see my cursor here, these are kind of shared spaces with trees at key points to break up the parking and stop problematic parking, blocking driveways and the like. So it's been very carefully looked at in all the different scales, this new place. So the next area here on the larger extract is the heart of the site, the higher density area. You can see here the annotation. The school site is this area here, which is a 2.5 form entry primary school down the bottom here, which is we know we've tested it's sufficient space for the buildings and the pitches and all the various requirements. So yes, it will fit. The two commercial buildings are here and here, and this is higher density with 3-story townhouses, flats on key corners. You can see very well defined positive building lines, as well as the kind of green infrastructure within the street scene. Parking is not dominant. Generally in these key areas, it's down the sides or in some very well overlooked, safe and secure rear parking courtyards you can see there and there. You can also, if you've got a big enough screen, start to see on some of the houses where I'm highlighting circular dots on some of the roofs. There's 3 of them there. There's another 3 there. There's another 2 there. There's another 2 there. There's 3 there. There's 3 there. There's 3 there. These denote across the whole scheme the locations of the affordable housing. So it's not one big 141 house cluster or group in a corner of the site. The affordable housing is basically distributed throughout the site in small clusters. So you've got terraces of 3, semi-detached, and 6 flats in some, so 6 flats in some of the corner locations. So the affordable housing is very well integrated as part of the new place, completely democratically provided. There's no area that doesn't have affordable housing within the scheme. So moving to the east side of the central area, key things to note here is a new school drop-off. You can follow my cursor coming in off Swansea Road. and a sort of a turnaround area here, which provides for parent drop-off as well as school coaches and buses to come into this area here. The key point of that is it removes any requirement for vehicles to drive into the existing garden village streets in order to drop off at the school. So if you're coming from the south or some of the existing school catchments, this is the route you'll come in. Otherwise, people dropping off at the school will come in from the north along the new hospital road access. It's also important to note on this scheme here, because I know it's come up as some of the kind of community concerns. There is no access at all to Fourth Talvan, which is here on my screen here. There's an old road that goes up to the boundary. There will be planting, there will be a fence, there will be no access between the new development and the existing community at that point because of the local concerns. There's extensive accesses elsewhere through parkland areas, but not in this location here. And the other accesses are all for foot and cycle. Other things to note in this area is the distributions of neighbourhood parks. The outward facing layout with houses facing out over the countryside, a full perimeter walkway. It's about 5 kilometres if you want to do a loop around the outside of the site, as well as what's called Biodiversity Park here, which is an important area of retained landscape. There's a stream corridor coming through. This is where there was important habitat. And the drainage features here, which you can see these two shapes here, are intended to hold shallow water all year round, which increases the biodiversity value as well, making sure they're safe as part of a public space, and as well as a very important focal point for the development. Moving on to the far western end of the site, again, same placemaking principles as previously, outward facing developments. You can see green streets here with integrated green infrastructure on the lower status streets, green verges and street trees on the higher status streets, as well as retained landscape, and the important kind of East End Park, which has got a sort of a main play feature. So this is useful just to jump back to remind ourselves of the whole overall site in its context. In terms of the some of the green spaces, the important Orchard Park, which I'll come on to, is located here. The sort of nature green space to the north and the various connections and linkages within the site, that permeable network, which is one of the requirements of the Residential Design Guidance SPG. So this zooms into Orchard Park, which will be a fantastic new park, both for the existing Garden Village community and the new community. It's a really big park created, I think, across 3 existing fields, where you've got the retained hedges kept as features, extensive play provisions for all ages and abilities. You've also got a multi-use games area, so often that's called a mooga, and a biking track using the slope in this part of the site. There's an orchard, hence its name, so there's various kind of what's called edible planting. There's things there that people can harvest in the autumn and learn about the seasons and all those sorts of things. You can see all the different paths and links coming through, joining the two communities, equality of access from both sides, and also it's pretty much, well, it's straight alongside the new school site. So the new school will also benefit from this fantastic park on its doorstep. There's also a very strong, active frontage of new houses to the north that provide really good levels of natural surveillance. So that park feels safe and welcoming for everyone. This is the sort of landscape design for that biodiversity park that I mentioned. Which shows how the 2 drainage areas will hold shallow water all year round, the retained vegetation, the various paths for public enjoyment of that space, very much bringing together that multifunctionality. There's an indication there of the play provision in the East End Park, and also throughout the whole layout you can see all the green circles showing the trees, and the circles around the trees you can see there's a sort of a solid green and then a sort of a green line that shows the future growth potential of these key trees. We want these trees to be allowed to mature, these trees that will provide that long-term greening in these developments, and they've been given that sufficient space to do that, and these trees will be in council ownership and management, so we can protect them via those means. This is a bird's eye view, starting to show that centre of the site, and its kind of working title is School Square, so it's effectively like you're above the school buildings looking north along the hospital road access, showing all those placemaking qualities but bringing them to life by the 3-dimensional view. You've got the street trees, the green verges, you've got the 2 commercial buildings here either side. You've got the higher density 3-story buildings with strong use of kind of repeating gables, front gables, that gives the scheme a really distinctive character. You've got the multifunctional public realm area on the front of the school, which has got parking for the commercial units. It could be used as school kind of gateway entry space, and as well as the sort of rest of the general housing, how it all integrates really positively and coherent is a new place. This has been extensively reviewed at all scales. So we haven't just focused on the key parts. Every part of this has been subject to that positive negotiation. Here's one of those neighbourhood parks at the western end of the site. Very much an incidental space, but well overlooked by housing frontages. There are significant level changes on this site, and some of these spaces will have some interesting slopes across them, but will still be accessible. We've made sure the parking is not dominant in these areas, so it's tucked down the side and side driveways. You've also got one of the blocks of flats nicely kind of turning the corner and overlooking that space there, and this shows how well a 3-story block of flats integrates with the 2 and 2.5-story houses. This is a bird's eye view of that biodiversity park, starting to bring it to life a bit more, showing how the space could look with the slope and the water and the retained trees and the stream corridor and all those sorts of things that I've been talking about on the previous sites. And pretty much the key message here, this brings nature into the heart of this new development. That's exactly what this whole placemaking and green infrastructure approach is all about. And this is this overview in terms of green infrastructure. And it's all about multifunctionality. And I know this is a big graphic on a small page. It's an extract from the applicant's design and access statement. And you can start to see there's different, well, firstly, it shows all the green spaces across the whole development and how well distributed they are and how significant they are. But the little iconographs that you can just about maybe see around each circle start to explain the different functions of the different areas. Some are for recreation, some are for water management, some are for biodiversity, some are for walking, some are for sitting, some are for outlook for houses, and how everything has these multiple purposes. And this is a really, really good example of this green infrastructure approach. That's why we're so positive about this development. It's also important to note part of that green infrastructure is the play and recreation strategy. So I've talked before about the main Orchard Park having the main play facilities here that I'm highlighting. The Eastern Park, obviously, it's a fair walk between the two ends of the site, has the other main kind of neighbourhood park, both in terms of the play categorizations as leaps, local equipped areas for play. And then you've got the whole, I think it's a 5-kilometre perimeter walk or run, a jogging track if you want, with various activity stations, various exercise points and information points about the landscape, about ecology. And again, this is kind of really getting to the heart of the placemaking. This is engaging the new development with the landscape. And we all know from the COVID lockdown how important access to our local green spaces have been, how treasured and how precious our local parks are, but also how you want multiple options. You don't want to do the same walk necessarily every single day. And this site offers that long 5-kilometre perimeter walk and numerous shortcuts and alternative routes, links to Gossyne and High Street, links to the wider landscape. So it's really well connected and really well integrated, bringing that green into the heart of the placemaking. So getting down to the green streets, as they're called, these are the kind of quieter streets. These are very low speed streets intended to be slower than 20 miles an hour. So cars will pretty much crawl through these areas. And we didn't want this to be dominated by lots of frontage parking and devoid of greenery. So we've made sure the greening comes right down to these small streets. So they're shared surface areas. So they have a clear distinction from this, what you'd call the standard streets. There's extensive tree planting, which some of is within the council control, within the public realm, so we know it can be maintained in perpetuity. Some of the house frontages have parking spaces that have reinforced grass, which means they could be used for parking or they could be used for gardens, which is a pretty innovative thing because we're not necessarily going to be having the same number of cars in the future. Have we reached peak car? That's one of these big discussions at the moment. And overall, this is a significant step change from the standard frontage parking development devoid of greening I mentioned, that shows that you can still have these arrangements, but you use the green infrastructure to create a really good green place out of that. So getting on into the architecture, I've got about 7 more slides left. There's 3 character areas across the site. Bearing in mind, this is a development by a PLC house builder. They do have standard house types. But the important thing is that those house types have an uplifted quality in this development, and they give it a very strong, very distinct character. So we've worked closely to look at what basically the standards are and how the houses can be improved, refined, uplifted. The core of the site in red that you can see on your screen, if I'm just sort of roughly waving my cursor around, is the main character area, which is described as the contemporary urban village, which I'll show you on the next few slides. Primarily the eastern end of the site is a contemporary character called Contemporary Garden Village. And then the western end, the lower density area, as well as the northern edges, as a more traditional, traditional country village character. So there's distinct parts of the site, so it doesn't all feel the same, but we are working with a mixture of contemporary and traditional characters. So this on the screen now is that main higher density contemporary urban village character area, which includes the commercial units, which is this unit here on the left hand side opposite the school. So this area is a use of red brick, weatherboard sort of horizontal cladding, feature window surround, Juliet balconies, contemporary canopies, and the frontages are typically hedges or railings. So this has a more sort of like maybe more urban feel, and that's considered to be a positive uplift of what we know underneath our standard house types. And I could also say throughout the site, the affordable housing has been treated in the same way as the character area within which it sits. So it's completely integrated and consistent in terms of architectural materials. So this is that orchard park, showing how that contemporary urban village character fronts onto that orchard park. Obviously different scales, but these houses here, if you can see my cursor wrapping around other ones at the top of your screen there, this is the steepest part of the site. So it starts to show how the houses work constructively and create and positively with the levels. We've got a block of flats at the top here on the right hand side, and you can see the balconies. Every flat has its own private balcony, which is a very important thing. Again, we've had that focused during COVID lockdown of flats with no balconies and no private amenity space. You can feel trapped, let's be honest. And these have those external spaces, and the houses stepping down have a good series of repeating gables, which gives it a really good sense of articulation. The houses also have Juliet balconies overlooking the park, so we know there's a strong level of natural surveillance. And also got to mention is the gables are a reference to the character of the existing garden village, which has a number of gables to properties. So there's a kind of a synergy of architecture there. Jumping to the commercial units opposite the school, there's potentially 4 units. So so there's 2 units and potentially 2 buildings, potentially 4 units, ground floor and first floor. So they could be used independently, could be used for a mixture of retail, could be a cafe bar or an office use. And the sketch at the bottom of the screen there starts to test the potential for sort of a spill out area, as it may be called, for external tables and chairs, if it were to be a cafe. How the parking works, that's all been tested with the disabled parking base provided as well. Servicing is from the front, so there's no rear servicing. These aren't large units, and that's all been agreed with highways and refuse strategy, so that the whatever deliveries are required fit into these laybys, and then these laybys at other times are used by whoever may be driving to the properties. Driving to the commercial units, but this is a walkable neighborhood. So the intention is that people would be able to walk to these units if it had a local cafe or whatever. It may even become, as we all very much focused on now, a co-working hub, a space for people to sit down with their laptops and get some good coffee and not have to travel into a central area to work. So the overall character shows they're a recognizable commercial unit, but using the same materials as the residential, and it creates a very strong focal point at the heart of the site. The architecture of the school is a separate reserve matters that will follow, and the school will respond to some of these key characteristics, but it creates a very good focal point at the center. The other contemporary character area is the contemporary garden village. So this uses some similar characteristics to the previous one. You've got a red brick, you've got weatherboarding, but Juliet balconies, and it also introduces 20% of the frontages have an element of render. So it's majority brick and render used to pick out some of the key features. And I've got to say, in these 2 character areas, we have the blocks of flats. Just move that up there. Which are well integrated with the 2-story houses. They have the same architectural approach overall. There's 9 blocks of flats, which are just about shown on this plan on your screen there, distributed along sort of east to west in the site. And of those 9 blocks of flats, 7 of them are affordable housing and 2 of them are private. And they're all 2 bedrooms. And as mentioned before, they all have a private balcony area there. Sorry, click on the next one. And then the final character area is the traditional country village area, which again, these are the same house types underneath, but you can see how they've been treated in a different way architecturally. They have pitched porches. There's a significant amount of sage green windows, which is a small thing, but that really helps kind of change the character, make it feel more of a coherent, place rather than a housing estate, which is definitely something we've been striving towards. The elevations include 60% red brick, 20% reconstituted stone, which is referencing the local pennant stone, which is found on the front of a lot of properties in this part of Swansea. 20% render, which will be a rough cast render, and we know that weather's better. And we're conscious we don't want these to be stained and all the problems that we know have happened on other sites. And the bottom of the screen are some of the larger Charles Church house types in the western part of the site. They include additional traditional details such as tile hanging to the gables that you can see there, and some various bandings and stonework features to further uplift. The other thing to notice at the bottom of the screen there is all the garage doors and front doors are green or a colour. There's no white doors or garage doors, and that makes a real difference to sort of make it feel higher quality, make it feel maybe more personable. And that's a really good example of how we've looked at the placemaking of this site, right from the strategic level of where are the open spaces, where are the main streets, how is the green infrastructure integrated, all those big picture things, right down to the tiny details that do make a difference, such as what colour is the front door. So we have looked at this at all those different scales. And this is the last slide, so it's time for me to sum up. So as I said before, 705 houses, 20% affordable housing, commercial units, mechanism for delivery of the new 2-form entry school. Overall, high quality integrated green infrastructure with all those retained landscape features, high quality uplifted house types, and it's definitely fully compliant with the national and the local policy frameworks and your supplementary planning guidance for residential developments called Places to Live. So just to completely wrap up, it totally exemplifies the placemaking approach that we are seeking to deliver in Swansea and that we're seeking to lead on across Wales. And this has potential to be an exemplar, both in terms of the collaborative working with the applicant and their team and the outcomes. So it's definitely a scheme your officers support, and for those reasons, it's recommended for approval. Thank you.
Excellent presentation there. I've got first is the agent is Luke Rattaroli wanted to address the committee. Luke?
Thank you,
Yeah.
Steve. Thank you all.
Yeah, cheers. Thank you.
I appreciate and thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of the proposal. I'll keep it very brief because that was an excellent presentation, extremely detailed, and has conveyed everything that we cumulatively and collaboratively have discussed over the last 18 months. Very much and very briefly, just from my perspective, I understand and believe that this is the second reserve matter and associated discharge of condition application on an LDP strategic site to be considered for approval by members. And as a result, and very briefly, this proposal covers the site in its entirety, with reserve matters being sought for but not limited to 705 units, 20% provision, I believe that's 141 affordable homes across 3 character areas. The design and the provision of the commercial units, the commercial core, detailed foul and surface water drainage proposals, detailed landscaping proposals both on plot and throughout the wider and extensively and intricately designed areas of public open space, areas of play, biodiversity and attenuation basins, and dedicated green infrastructure across the site, all of which are intrinsic to the layout, as well as a number of other technical matters which respond to outline planning conditions such as coal mining and site investigatory works, air quality assessment, arboricultural impact assessment and tree protection measures, as well as another technical matter, provision of a bus gate which restricts vehicular access from Swansea Road to a limited part of the southern portion of the site. As Chris alluded to at the start, and in terms of technical matters, there are no objections from statutory consultees, and that's a result of the dedicated process that we've all been involved in for the last 18 months. The outcome and proposal presented before you by officers is a product of efficient and effective collaborative working between the developer and the local authority, especially through what was a tricky time during a major pandemic throughout the majority of 2020. Therefore, this is an outcome of real hard work between the City and County of Swansea officers, Lucy Kelly, Steve Smith, Tom Evans, Matthew Bowyer, Chris Healy and Ian Davis, just to name a few, as well as Persimmon Homes and their appointed consultant team. By way of a very brief reminder, of course, there are Section 106 obligations which were levied and agreed at the outline stage, and the obligations will be paid and or undertaken in accordance with the relevant trigger points specified in that legal agreement. There are also a number of other outline planning conditions which do need to be discharged prior to appropriate trigger points as well, and they will be dealt with in due course. As I say, I've kept this brief, and I appreciate the opportunity to share my thoughts, and as a result, and as per the recommendation, I do respectfully request that members seek to approve these reserved matter applications. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. I got 3 hands up there, but we start with the first one, is the local member, Councillor Evans. Well.
Sorry about that. If I can ask one question at this stage, and then I'll come back with some comments later on. I'm looking for clarity, and I have spoken to Lucy Kelly on it, but I still want some confirmation on the security boundary on the south of the site, which is by the Orchard Park, adjacent to Ford Bringwyn and Clos Bringwyn. At the moment, you've got a farmer's fence in, which keeps the animals in at the moment. There's 2 very large gateways, which the farmer keeps locked by padlocks. What form of boundary security will there be in place when this site is finally developed? Because it gives me concerns, not least of off-road bikers using that land, and it could be that caravans could drive onto it. You know, there's all sorts of issues that could arise, and I just want to know what sort of boundary will be in place on the perimeter on the south side of the site.
Yeah, okay, so we come back to that. There could be a couple of questions. Councillor Des Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Stephen always brings his enthusiasm, doesn't he, to his presentations. So thank you, Stephen. It's very interesting. Must be good for officers to be working on such a large scale greenfield sort of project. Sage green, is that the new grey? The other thing I've got is parking. I mean, I was chatting to Matthew before the meeting started, and even with the latest developments that have sprung up around the city, and of course it's across the country, parking is always an issue. There is never sufficient parking spaces provided. So I'm glad that such efforts have been made into containing parking on this site out of place as much as possible, all walking distances. I mean, I've got a question about the drop-off point for the school. I know that the school is going to be within walking distance of most of the homes, but you will still have people leaving home to go to work and dropping the children off at the same time. So there will be the need of parking issues, as we see outside every primary school across the city. You've answered my affordable homes question. They'll be pepper potted virtually around the site, which is always good to hear. The block of flats at the top of the hill rather than the bottom, doesn't that just accentuate the rise? And I would have thought it would have been the other way around, but that's obviously an architect's point of view. Trees, I mean, yeah, very, very, very important, isn't it? The trees, but people do get annoyed if the wrong type of tree is close to where they live. I think I hope that consideration has been given to the type of tree that is planted. Lots of sort of fastigated varieties that grow up rather than out, etc. And as I said initially, this is a very exciting project. It's bringing as I see it, it's bringing the garden back into the garden village, and indeed it's bringing the village back as well, isn't it? Because it'll be a village in itself. So well done, everyone. Very exciting, and I'm very pleased to support the application. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Councillor Mike Lewis.
Yes, Des has covered most of what I was going to say, but I have reservation with Steve's comments that we will have less cars in the future, as this site is not a site that has ready access to shops and offices, and car travel will still be required. Can I ask, have all the properties got off-street parking, and if so, how much space and for how many cars per property? And can you assure us that the access road from Swansea Road to the proposed new school drop-off, is this wide enough for coaches when cars are parked on this link road? Or do you envisage providing parking regulations on this road to stop people parking there and in doing so make a free access for the coaches? That's basically, I know it's covering what Des has said, but I have got great reservations on this particular aspect of the scheme. So if Steve could come back to me on that, thank you very much.
Okay, come back with him if that's okay in the moment. Councillor Mary Jones.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, yes, Steve, for the brilliant slides as usual, and brings it all to life. Funny enough, I was going to mention about species of trees, and of course, Des used a word that I probably wouldn't even have thought of. So yes, I hope that the right species of trees are in the right place, because we all know people come back, and are they going to have TPOs on them is part of the question. But my main question is about Biodiversity Park and Orchard Park, I think they were, and about the ponds, or whatever you call them, the water that's in them. And I'm really concerned because I'm assuming they're just going to be left open. Now, because of the nature of the site and because of the school, it's going to attract an awful lot of young families. And where there's water, it's danger. We've had enough problems over the past years with the marina having to be fenced in, and I'm really concerned that, as attractive as they look, are we being very wise in putting these open spaces where we don't want an accident, and it can happen that there are younger children that live nearby, could be out playing and falling. So I would like an answer about that. And the other one was about the doors and windows and things like that. There is a condition I've noticed to say about them, but if I remember correctly, the estate in my ward, Hendreboyland Woods, residents weren't allowed to change their doors or windows for a period of time, and they weren't even allowed to have cable television, which it was in those days, because of digging up the pavement. Have we got the same kind of conditions, which I haven't found them, or are they worded in a different way, that they will be all kept to these colours for a specified amount of time, and also about any digging up of pavements or roads within, unless of course it's a gas leak. So I would like some answers, but apart from that, I think it's a really, really good scheme. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. Councillor Linda Tyler-Lloyd.
I had a phone call from Mrs. Evans, who lives in Broomland Road, Gosainen. Now, she was concerned about the access to her road and whether this will be a thoroughfare. I know nothing about this area. I think that this is something that probably Councillor Will Evans would be able to deal with. But she asked me, would I bring up that her concerns are, she thinks the site is wonderful, she hasn't got an objection to the site, but she's concerned about her road and the access to this new garden village from her road in Gosainen. I know nothing about this, so I hand it over to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll come back for that. Councillor Downing.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. As a newest member of this committee, can I first of all thank the officer for an excellent report Obviously, I've read it thoroughly because there is a strategic site in my own ward. I wrote down trees like Des because, to be quite honest, trees were planted 25 years ago near houses, and I get a lot of complaints that these trees are now massive. So I think Des was right. The right trees have got to be planted for the people that are living there now, but the people living there in 25 years' time as well. Parking, that's been mentioned, and the other thing was the primary school. Is there a trigger point when that primary school has to be built? And secondly, I couldn't see anything there about secondary schooling. So I don't know if you've considered that, because our comprehensive schools full to the brim. Well, I know the one in Pontylices. I don't know about well, because Penrell is the catchment area for this site. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Come back, Councillor Evans. You wanted to come back.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to comment on a few things in the actual report before us today. I know it's a very large and well presented 147-page reserve matters report. And I want to point out to members that the application contains amended plans, which are as a result of issues raised by planning officers regarding the original site layout, the house types, and separation distances. The revised plans show the refinements now carried out, which I am fully approving of, and also a reduction of new homes from 750 to 705. Pages 15 to 18 of the report highlights an objection originally from the Coal Authority concerning outstanding information on mine shafts contained within the site. As I said, this objection is now at a late stage being withdrawn, so that's out of the way. Page 43 of the report refers to the new plans that now show trees T46 and T47 as being retained. These were incorrectly shown, removed in the first submission of the plans. Page 130 to 131 shows details of the development section 106 financial contributions, which includes a 5.5 million payment towards a new primary school. And as Councillor Downing has raised, that money will be paid to the council, because the council will now be building the school when the 201st house is occupied, Councillor Downing. So how long that'll be, I don't know, probably 2 or 3 years. There's also a payment of 783,438 for highway improvement works, which I sincerely hope will address the perceived increase in traffic congestion in this area, which already experiences traffic gridlock during peak times of the day. Finally, as has been expressed by other members, I'm very pleased with the layout of this site as it stands at the moment. There are lots of pleasing features. There is a significant number of public open spaces across the site, including walking and cycling routes, a multi-use games area, and several neighbourhood equipped and locally equipped areas, which will be accessible not only to the existing Garden Village residents, but also the new community. So all in all, I'm very, very pleased with the outcome that's before us today, and will be supporting the recommendation of approval. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. I got no other hands up, so perhaps Steve or Chris, would you like to? Okay. Lucy, would come back with any replies?
Okay, I'll start then, and perhaps Steve and Lucy can pick up one or two of the other questions. Okay, I made as many notes as I could, but please forgive me if I've missed out some of the queries that you've raised. So in terms of the query regarding the primary school, as Councillor Evans has just mentioned, the trigger point for the primary school or the contribution towards it is, well, there are actually two. So the main one is on the council get the main bulk of the money on the occupation of the 201st residential unit. But before that, I think before works start on site, the developer has got to pay the council somewhere in the region of £266,000, and that money is there for the council to start making, preparations and designing the school, in essence. So that money will be received first, and then the remainder will be used to actually construct the school upon occupation of the 201st unit. In terms of the secondary school, there was no requirement for that when we considered the outline application. Our education department just asked for the provision of a 2.5 form entry school, which is what was requested as part of the 106, councillor. And I think it was Councillor Linda Tyler Lloyd mentioned the Suds ponds, I think. And I think expressed, or was it Councillor Mary Jones? Sorry,
Mary Jones.
Sorry. Yeah, so as Steve mentioned in his presentation, there are going to be a variety of suds ponds. I accept your concerns, but I think what you will find is, because of suds requirements, a lot of the new developments in Swansea now are going to feature these suds ponds. There are similar type of ponds. I know there's some kind of a tenation pond up in the Tecoy Village site. So these are going to be more and more common as these larger sites come forward. I'm not quite sure of the depth of them, for example. I think that will vary from site to site and from pond to pond, but it's one of those issues that I think we have to accept need to be a feature with all of these developments. So although I do accept that you have got some safety concerns regarding children and so on. In terms of the parking, perhaps Matt can comment on the parking issues relating to the school. Although I do know that there is a dedicated drop-off area for the school proposed as part of the development. I mean, I think we do anticipate that a lot of these school children living within the site will hopefully get there by means of foot. They will not be driven there because obviously, as Steve mentioned earlier, the school is within the heart of the site. So I'd like to think most people will walk there rather than try and get there by car. Although, I think we do accept that there will be some children coming from further afield outside the site, which potentially will arrive by car, but there are parking facilities and drop-off facilities provided. But as I say, I'll let Matt comment further on that. In terms of parking for each housing, as far as I'm aware, each house is dedicated by sufficient car parking provision in accordance with the council's supplementary planning guidelines. And the other note I've made was on the query raised by Councillor Will Evans about the south site boundary. I know Lucy has just got a plan ready to comment on that, Will, so I'll pass you over to Lucy. Okay. So you can answer your query on that.
Yes, hello, Councillor. I'll just share my screen if I may. Just give me a second or two to get the technology to work. Hopefully you can see this now. This is a larger scale drawing of the park in Orchard Park. And you can't really see it because it's very faint on the drawing, but there's a boundary line running along the bottom area here, which is indicative of either estate railings or a knee-high rail along the bottom to prevent access in and out, other than where the paths proposed join onto the existing carriageway here, up here go towards Clos Bryngwyn, and then again up here again in this section there. So all of this will be retained, the existing hedgerow will be retained as far as it is possible, and established and additional planting, particularly around this area here. As far as we know, there are no gates at the moment to be positioned in these access points, but if it proves in the future that there are issues, then that can be resolved at a later time. The park will be maintained and adopted by the council, so we will have control over that to make any alterations should any be necessary in the future. With regard the boundary treatment in details, condition 32 of the outline consent requires the full details to be submitted in due course, which we shall have in the not too distant future. So we will ensure that all the boundary treatments to all the dwellings, all the public open spaces, and all of those details then will be assessed and concluded through that process of the discharge of conditions.
Okay. Thank you very much. Matt, did you want to come back on?
Yes, just a couple of points to jump in on. Councillor Lewis raised a point about the access road from Swansea Road and access to the school and whether it's available for coaches. That it is a slightly wider access coming in from Swansea Road. It has been tracked for two-way coach movements. There is a priority narrowing on it to keep speed down. I don't foresee that there'll be a need for any sort of blanket TROs. I mean, possibly some sort of junction protection on the way in, just to make sure people can manoeuvre off Swansea Road. But there's plenty of width there. There's plenty of drop-off available for the school, coach drop-off, and we don't think there's going to be any issues in that regard. The rest of the site has adequate parking, enough for each dwelling. To be perfectly honest with you, I think it's quite clever and quite innovative the way that they've sort of designed the house layout, especially on the narrower streets, which it's been designed at the plot level to prevent indiscriminate parking, because if you try and leave your car anywhere where it shouldn't be, you're going to be blocking your neighbour in or completely blocking the road. So people generally won't do that, and that's supplemented then with a lot of visitor parking in sort of lay-bys. It's pepper potted throughout the development, so there's plenty of visitor parking available all over. And yeah, I'm really happy with the approach they've taken. I think it's very clever.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So let's. Yeah. No one will come back other than Councillor Evans.
Yeah, just quick reply to Kelly. Lucy, sorry. Can you just? My concern really was regarding the existing farmers' gates, which are about 15 foot wide, so they're very wide. You know, they get a cattle wagon through them, and I'd appreciate that there will be a desirability for access for the council, the grass cut, etc., etc. But what form of, because when these gates at the moment are locked, so when they're removed or whatever, am I right in saying there'll be some sort of low fencing? Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, councillor. The estate railings, which are these sort of just over 3 feet in height railings with 3 bars across the metal construction, which would be along the perimeters, and also the knee-high railing, which is the wooden railing, which comes up to your knees. So that would prevent any unauthorised access into the site. I mean, where the farmers' gates are at the moment, if I share my screen again, 2 seconds, I'll show you, hang on, where is it? Sorry, I'm losing my cursor. These points here, that's where the big gate is there. I think there's another one here at this point. You can see that there is a narrower access point for the public to access in and out at that point. Yeah. And there will be fencing either side of that, so it wouldn't allow for a vehicle. The width isn't sufficient enough to allow for vehicles to cross through. I mean, obviously, the council will, you know, it's as Steve mentioned previously, the site is quite well overlooked from the existing houses along Closs Bryn here, Fourth Bryn, sorry, along the bottom, and from the new developments here along the top. And you know, we're hoping that it will be used correctly and properly by the public and not cause any antisocial behaviour issues. But obviously, if there are issues that are raised, that will be a matter for the police in the future. But we're hoping that those sorts of elements have been designed out at this stage.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that, Bruce. Councillor Mary Jones.
Yeah, thank you. I haven't had answers to 2 of my questions. One was about TPOs. I noticed that there's TPOs, I think, on the individual trees, maybe in people's gardens. I was asking if there's TPOs on the site itself, the whole site, and the other one was about the condition about doors and windows, and if there is anything that people have to keep them for a certain amount of time. All I can see is the condition of what the windows and doors have to be, not if they have to keep them, and also about digging up the pavements to put other utilities in.
Yeah, yes, you are right. Councillor Des Thomas.
Yeah, I just wanted someone to answer the question on the types of trees. I'm assuming that a company the size of Persimmon would have their own arboriculturalists, etc., and come up with suitable trees. But as other members have said, it becomes an issue with time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Shall I respond on the trees? In terms of the planting across the whole site, that's had extensive input from the council's landscape architect. So he's reviewed the proposals by Persimmon's landscape consultants, EDP, and after some negotiation, the council's landscape architect is, again, supporting that planting proposal. The new street trees are sufficiently far away from the houses and are of the correct species, as Councillor Thomas suggested, the right shape, those taller vertical shapes that won't necessarily spread across, to touch the house and those sorts of things. I don't know what the species are off the top of my head. It is in the minutiae of the detail of those plans. So we do have all that information, and the landscape team are supporting that. And the existing hedges, again, Lucy and maybe Chris could help me here, are also existing trees within the site are TPO'd. So that's why there was a reference to trees, some of the trees T46 and T47 being retained, so they were some of the protected trees that have been kept as part of the development. But I understand the intention is not to TPO the private trees within the plots, and maybe Chris and Lucy could come in there and clarify that for us.
Okay.
If I can just clarify on the tree situation, there are a number of TPO trees across the site which were assessed prior to the applications being submitted, and they were TPO'd by our council's tree officer, and they are to be retained as they in situ, and there's a lot of hedgerows on the site as well, which will be maintained and retained where it's possible to enhance to allow for further connectivity in terms of the biodiversity. In terms of the trees to be planted in the streets, as Steve mentioned before, they will be within the council's ownership, so they will be protected by virtue of being maintained and retained in adoptable areas by the council. And Alan Webster, our tree officer, is looking to TPO a lot of the new trees when they're planted, so that they will be retained in perpetuity. So we're confident that those trees will be the correct species in the correct positions and not cause problems in the future.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Linda Tyler-Lloyd, and then Councillor Evans.
If I must bring forward again the concerns of the people who are living in Brunel Road, can you just show me where it is, where Brunel Road is in relation to this site? Because I think the concerns were whether they were going to have access to this new development from that road, and that is a question that I did promise I would ask. Thank you.
Chair, can I just say Brunel Road is nowhere near the entrance of the site. It's in Gosainen, so I don't know the relevance of I
think I know where you are, yeah. Did you have your hand up to speak now, Councillor Evans?
Yes, we dealt with that point, have we, from Councillor Linda Tyler-Lloyd?
Yes.
Yeah, one final question from me to Steve. I take it, Steve, that on some of these properties there are integral garages. If that is the case, that takes into account the off-road parking calculations. Have we got any conditions on this application to prevent in future people putting in an application to turn their garage into a living accommodation whereby the loss of a parking space would be lost? I know at the moment, unless there's a condition in it, we can't do much about it. So any new developments should take this into account. So have you taken it into account?
Yeah, that's correct, Councillor Evans. The integral garages have been counted in the parking calculation where they are the correct size, which is 6 by 3 metres. And Lucy will have withdrawn the permitted development rights for them to be converted to residential. So the applicants, the owners, could in future apply to convert them to residential on the ground on those garages, and we would potentially resist that. Although, as Matt Boyer indicated, there is significant amounts of overspill parking designed into this development to make sure, to allow for some of those variations in car ownership between households. But we do have control over that aspect. That is correct. I will also mention, in terms of the doors, Councillor Mary Jones asked about that, and you're probably still wanting us to respond on that. The condition requires the doors to be certain colours, i.e. not a white colour, but it doesn't require the doors to be maintained in those colours in perpetuity. And there is an increasing sort of new generation of paints that can be used to paint UPVC, so people can change their door colours in future, and that's part of the kind of beauty of these developments becoming established, where you get that variety of colours, people's personal taste, that kind of personalisation. So yes, they can have varieties of colour in the future, but they'll start off in, a mixture of colours that aren't white.
Okay, thank you. And my last speaker is Councillor Mary Jones.
Yeah, so I go back to this TPO business. I can't understand why the site itself can't have a TPO on it, because it happened in my own ward, which was a rural ward. It had all the existing hedgerows and boundaries, and even those have got TPOs on them. And I just don't understand why we're not doing it in this case, and we're just doing, ones here and there. I mean, we want to have the greenery, and it is important, and people do destroy hedgerows. So I'm extremely concerned that we're not perhaps being a little more stricter with what we're doing about the existing part of the site that we're not pulling up when they're building.
Okay, but the hedges, Councillor Jones, all the hedges that are retained are within the public realm, they will be within council ownership once they're adopted. So the hedges will be maintained by the council as biodiversity corridors, so that there are no hedges in any of the private gardens. I know that's sometimes the concern, where developments have hedges within back gardens and then they eventually get taken away, don't they? But we've specifically made sure that those retained green corridors are totally within the public realm. So the council is the custodian of those hedges.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just come in on there? Sorry, Chair. Sorry, Councillor Jones. I think you're also referring to trees perhaps planted in the private gardens of properties.
Yes, I did, because as you know, we've had a slight issue with 2 big trees put in gardens recently in the old student village, and I think we need to be very careful of the species of trees we put either in gardens or very close to people's properties.
Okay, well, in terms of the protection of trees, I know Steve's mentioned that those in the public realm, the council have got control over those. In terms of the trees planted in private gardens, the condition 7, which is set out on page 8B, requires any landscaping works that they be protected for a minimum period of 5 years. I mean, if it was the wish of councillors that any trees planted in private gardens be protected by means of a TPO, that's something I think we would have to look at that point in time. So there's protection for the first 5 years. If, for example, we thought we needed to impose TPOs in any of the trees in private garden areas because they made a valuable contribution to the visual amenity, we could do so, but that's obviously a separate process from the planning permission that's been granted.
Okay.
There was one other question I don't think has been answered, which was the issue of potentially people wanting to dig up roads in terms of in order to install services such as internet connection. So I'm not aware that there would be any anything in place to prevent that. So certainly there's no restrictions from a planning perspective. If the roads are adopted, then that would be a matter for our own highways department, I'm assuming, Matt.
Yeah, I mean, once it's adopted under 38, I mean, they would be protected for 5 years, but that wouldn't apply to new connections. But as part of the Section 38 process, all the utilities would be approached to see if they want to put their apparatus in the ground now. But once it's an adopted highway, if they are a statutory undertaker, then obviously they have a statutory right to be able to go and provide a new connection if somebody wants one. But with what generally happens with these new developments is anyone who wants to get in there will get in while they're constructing it, because it's much easier and much cheaper for them, and they won't go back afterwards.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you all. I think that's everything covered. Can I first off thank you, all officers been involved in this. Reading the report, and well imagine all the hard work you put in to come to the table today. It's much appreciated. And as early on the officer said, the site already has got outline planning permission, so the principle of development on the site is therefore established. So what we're deciding on is the design and the outlay of the site, and that's where we are now. So in a moment, go on the vote, which is go to the vote, which recommendation is approval.
Yes, Chairman. I call members on individually. Councillor Cyril Anderson.
4.
Peter Black.
4.
Phil Darling.
4.
Will Evans.
4.
Mary Jones.
4.
Mike Lewis.
4.
Richard Gibson present. Paul Smith present. Des Thomas.
You voted, Des.
4.
Councillor Linda Taylor Lloyd.
4.
Councillor Mike White.
4.
And Paul Lloyd.
4.
So that's unanimous.
Unanimously. Thank you very much. And then the second item, the final item, is item 2, which you see is again at land north of Garden Village, and the report starts at page 83 in your report. And so is it to you again, Chris?
Yeah, so I'll be quite brief on this. So the first application, which councillors have just voted through, provides details of landscaping, layout, scale, access arrangements, and appearance of the building. So that encompassed all of the reserve matters which were required at outline stage. This second application only provides us with details of landscaping, which you've already approved by approving the first application, together with the discharge of some conditions. So the landscaping details, which form part of the second application, you've just already approved. They're identical to those in the first application. So there's not much more for me to say, really. You've already considered that the landscaping matters in the previous discussion, and there are, I think there's 3 or 4 discharge of condition applications in there as well, which all the consultees are happy with. So I won't say any further, really.
Okay, thank you.
I move the recommendation, Chair.
First off, but I know that Luke Crossroller wanted to address this. Did you?
Okay, sorry.
No, Chair, thank you, but no, thank you. I think it's I think it's self-explanatory, and appreciate the efforts beforehand in the first item.
Okay, all right, then. Well, I can't see any hands up. So Councillor Des Thomas has moved the recommendation. Is somebody second that?
I second it, Chair.
Thank you. All right, then. We've received again the recommendation then is approval. We can now again move to the vote.
Yep. Councillor Cyril Anderson.
4.
Councillor Peter Black.
4.
Phil Dowling.
4.
Will Evans. Councillor Evans.
4.
Mary Jones.
4.
Mike Lewis.
4.
Des Thomas.
4.
Linda Taylor Lloyd.
Rejection. Okay.
It's not present.
Oh.
Councillor Mike White.
4.
And Councillor Paul Lloyd.
Yeah, 4. Thank you.
94, none against, Chairman.
So that's carried, and thank you very much for your time this morning, everyone. And I'll see you again next Tuesday. Thank you all.
Bye.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye. Bye.